Hey, welcome to the Dream Labs. Dr. Contrast live here. Hope all is well. And oh, hey, by the way, Captain Nemo, boy, it's good to see you again on the chat side of life here. You must have been pretty busy, missing you the last couple of sessions here. So I hope you're well. And if you have had a chance to catch the last stream we did last Monday, a week ago, we started another series on the Constitution or the ground rules or parameters of light source and how it functions. So today I'm going to pick up a little bit of a lesson plan and do a second section here, and just go through a little bit of review and bring you back up to speed here, hopefully, and we'll move on to another subject matter a week from today. So again, the light source part 2, very, very simple set of circumstances here. Just using basic geometry. Hey, very busy, but good. Well, it's good. I'm glad all is well with you, Captain Nemo. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a lot of fun here today. But we started this program a week ago with a very simple premise. I think there's a lot of mystery about light source and how it begins to function. And it changes dramatically. And I'm certainly not here today to say that there's a set of rules or it's very fixed. There's a principle at mind that we work with, but that principle can be used almost universally, but it doesn't apply in all cases. Obviously, the more complicated a shape gets, the more we have to really be careful how to plot that thing so it looks like it's believable. But today's whole circumstances, go back in and review some of things we did last week, and we're just going to work with some very basic geometry here today, again, like we did last Monday, like cylinders, conical forms, compound shapes, just keeping things very simple so we can see how this whole process begins to function here. So as we stated last week, what I started with was this very simple elevation of a cube here, obviously. And we're going to build a premise on this light source stuff by doing two simple things. Number one, honoring the angle of light, which is the very secret of one of the aspects of the secret of success. The other is the direction of light, which comes on the ground plane. So that direction is going to be critical in combination with the angle. And we're going to find out, and each time we go through some of these shapes, we're going to develop, hey, Doug, how are you, man? You ready to learn? Yeah, me too, Doug. So we'll find, too, that once the angle of light and the direction of light begin to intersect, then we know that's the contact point that we're going to utilize to develop the shadow. Now we use this cube here in the third dimension, or this little perspective study, to show you how that operates. And the one thing we made a lot of a very big, I think, and a very big and important issue of last Monday was this simple principle. I've always been a real habit, gotten into a real habit due to my tutoring years at CCS and at General Motors design staff, of taking that light source extremely high. For this reason, if you look at this very simply here, look how shallow that shadow gets over the top of that, from the edge of that cube, or the face of that cube. Obviously, the more steep, or the greater the angle of that light source, or the direction is, look at the length of that shadow. That's one of the problems with the illustration, for example. We'll get caught up in some of the shadow definition, and all of a sudden we'll find out that when it's all said and done, that the shadow begins to overpower the actual object itself. So the whole lesson today is to really play around, and not play around, but really focus in on three good simple processes. Number one, always keep the light source high and above the object. Number two, that allows you to tuck it in underneath the shadow and flatter the shape, and it really accentuates the shape. And number three, don't be afraid to drive the shadow back in the picture plane. Take the viewer back in the picture plane. For example, drive them back inside that form so it keeps the front side clean and you know where that direction of light is. So those are three, I think, very important principles we'll go through throughout the course of the afternoon here. We'll go through this process. So let's start this execution here. Now, notice we're going to pick up this very simple thing on this cube, for example. Again, the angle, we're going to set an angle, and we're going to set a direction. First thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to set a direction by doing this. Out here, there's my direction of light. Now, it's really interesting. Once that direction is set, notice light source, or light in this case, and we're using sunlight rays, which are parallel one another. So we're going to keep all those light, or direction of lights, parallel. So we're going to come from this corner, one, to this corner, and again, parallel again, run that right out, and draw through this shape. So get back to this corner here on the back corner of the cube itself. Take that point and run it right through again, parallel, and again, parallel. So those three elements give me, let's do this, give me three elements of direction. There it is, direction, direction, and direction. That's where the light source is coming from. Now the next trick is to pick an angle of light. I'm going to rotate this a bit, so pardon me. Angle of light is going to be here, off that corner, here, parallel, off of that corner, and off this back corner, right here, something very close, but really tight, right inside there. There's my third line right there. Those three elements right there, that one, and that one, determine the angle of light. Notice how, again, it's a very extremely high light source to keep that shadow tucked underneath that form here. So next thing we look for is this: intersection on the ground plane, intersection on the ground plane, intersection on the ground plane. And we just draw right through it. We connect the dots. We go here. We go from there, back in the corner here. And I'm drawing this as if it were transparent, so you can see how we get that backside corner to work right here. That's really critical. The little edge right there tells me where that is. And by the way, this represents here, this large area that we've outlined here as a ground plane. That's where it's going to settle the shape as we go through this process. So let's do this. Once we've got that set, let's put the shadow in place. There it is. Very simple. Tone that in. Take it right around the corner just a bit. And there is my shadow. Put a little bit more beef in this thing, a little more strength to it. Pardon my hands. There's a shadow of that cube coming off an extreme highlight source, and again, a very simple attitude of direction of light. Look again how we took that. Here's the direction of perspective here. Here's my perspective line. Look how we took that line and drove it back. Meaning, for example, we pushed the shadow back in space to allow the form to come full forward. So let's get that a little established there. Let's kind of go back in here. Let's get that sketch out of the way. Let's go through a series of just very interesting little surface studies here to see what we come up with here. Let's go to a round surface. Let's do like a little flashlight of some sort, very simple little sketch. So let's get plotted in here. We're going to go here, and we're going to go here. We're going to go here. And again, lastly, here. Those are the volumes we're going to work with. And I'm going to start connecting the dots. We'll come back in through here. Cylinder to cylinder, to cone, back to cone. Again, cone to cone, back to cylinder. Let's beef that up just a bit more so we can see it. There's the basic shape I just generated. Comes off the back of this, down the ground, runs through. Pardon me as I rotate this back again. Get this in the shape here. There, and there's a bit of a recess there. Let's just say this kicks back just a bit. Notice, there's the basic volume. Now, how do I determine where I'm going to use those angle of light contact points to help me determine the ground plane? Well, first of all, let's get the direction of light down first. I want that direction right there. I'm going to take that light. There's my direction right there in red. That's primarily where it's going to come from. That's my direction of light. Next thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to come back through here, and just for what it's worth, so we know how to plot this thing, this all happens mentally. You're kind of thinking your way through the shape as you go through it, but let's do this. Let's do this. Let's find that a cube into which that circle sets. Let's do this. Let's find its center. Run that right through. That's a critical point right there. That element right there tells me where the actual contact point that I'm going to use to develop the light source and the angle of light on the shape. So I'm going to take it back in surface. Notice it's downhill, so it's going to come downhill, come back uphill, and go right through this form. There's the axis upon which that line I'm going to utilize to determine where the light source is coming from. So my next step is going to be, I'm going to pick a point right here on that reference. I'm going to pick a point there, and I'm going to pick a point right there to help determine the angle of light. And also I can use this one. Let's do this. Now, what I've done is this. In highlight form, here's my circle, looking at it just in circle form here. I found the center. Pardon my hands here, okay? Let me bring this down just a bit. Found the center by doing the following. The center, and there's my center right there. Now I drew that horizontal right through it. That point on that circle is what's happening here, 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 and here. That's the widest tangent that allows me to tell me where that light source is going to come from direction-wise. Let me stop there for a moment. Now, I don't want to turn this into a real headache in terms of, oh my goodness, there's a lot of plotting going on here. And it is a thinking process, yes, but it's also a combination of aesthetics and mechanics that we discussed last Monday. So let me stop right here and just get a feel for you get from you all. Am I communicating all right? So far, so good? I just want to make sure we're making the right target points here to make this thing come together. Super, very good. Nemo, thanks very much. So far, so good. Now we have those contact points based on that center line that throughout through. Notice I'm following the form: conical form, cylinder. It all works together. I mean, it's amazing how really mystifying and how profound this stuff is when you start to analyze it for what it's worth. Let me just do this too. Pardon me. I'm just going to beef this up just a bit more so we can see where that whole process works. There's a circle that we're looking for. And there's my tie line right there. Let's go that in red. There's my tie line, and there's my circle I'm looking for right there. That's critical. That's on the tangent. Super. Now we're going to come down and do this. Now we've got the direction set. Let's do this. Here's the direction. I'm going to come right back in through here. Now that point, I'm going to set an angle of light. Here's my angle of light. Running that parallel. Run that parallel. Run that parallel. Then run that parallel. Interesting. Now here's the cool part. That doesn't solve the problem yet. We're going to come down here and do this. Drop that down vertically. Drop that down vertically. Drop that down vertically. And then again, direction of light from there. Direction of light. There, direction of light. There, direction of light. And where they intersect, look at this. That point, that point, that point, and that point. Oh, pardon me, out here. Look at that set up the shadow. Now, a little bit of roundness back here. And we go back in here. It says ink it in. It's this, to this, to that, to that. Look how that happened. Tangent down to ground. Tangent down to ground. Tangent down to ground, and then angle or direction of light, and where they intersect, all 4 points, do the following. Now let's do this. Again, very high light source. Let's just tone this in. Pardon the clients here, just want to make sure we get this good solid tone in here to work with. And there it is. There's my shadow on that very complicated form here. Now, on this piece here, let's just do this. This is a recess. If I were to cut a section through there, it looks like this. There's the lens, which is here. There's the sidewall here. There's the sidewall here. There's the edge of the form, and it goes off into a conical shape and does the following. That's a plan view looking down in that section. Oops. There's a plan view looking down in that section. I'm going to use this sidewall here to develop that shape by coming in here and just dropping a line down and saying, all right, there's a little bit of a direction here, a little bit of direction there, and where it touches right in through here, I'm just going to put in a shadow that does the following. Does this, comes in, turns around, notice how I'm following the circle, comes in, and goes in the shadow right there. The outline is flat. Pardon me as I do this. Now come around here. Notice how flat that line is. Why? Because that bevel is flat. I'm just following those surfaces all the way through. So there's a basic, very quick, simple little shape to work with here. Pardon me, I'm losing my voice again. In terms of putting together the plot lines or this whole idea. Again, the angle of light and the direction of light. Let's go on here with another exercise. Hope this is making sense here, gang. Thank you. So let's do this. Let's come back in and get just a basic sketch there. We'll come back in through here. Sketch through it. Set up a drive line here. Another one. Connect the dots a little bit. Now let's put a little bit of an angle on this thing. Let's take it back and do that. And there it is. And let's take it back in space. Let's put a little radius on this guy. Radius here, and there, and there. There, and there. Same process again. Now that I've got the shape down, I'm going to come back and put a little bit of negative in through here. Pardon me. So this is basically the form right here. Let's put a little bit of banding around this so it doesn't look like a raw edge. Let's put a little bit of banding on it, and there it is. So there's another form right there. So same process again. Once I've got that shape down, I'm going to come back in and the direction of light. It's direction. I'm going to come back in, right up top here. I'm going to pick an intersection there, and there, and there, and there. Those are the points I'm going to use or utilize to develop this shadow. I'm going to rotate just for a moment here. Here's my angle of light. Here's my angle of light. Angle of light. Parallel. Angle of light, parallel. Let's come back out. Right, same thing again. Go vertical, come vertical, come vertical. Again, angle of light, bring it out. bring it up, bring it up. So again, parallel, parallel, parallel. Look at those intersections there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's go back in here and get that. This block it in. It's this into this. There's my shadow. So I'm going to put a little bit of radius on this guy. Let's tone it in. There's my shadow right there. That's it. Same process again. All those intersections all come together here. Now let's do this. Let's come back in. That same light source here. Let's do this. I'll pick a spot right to there. Same again. It's going to put a shadow inside this thing by doing the following. It's going to do this. Into that. And let it fade. Here's my light source. That's how I'm going to get dimension in that form. So there are two methods here to kind of get things started about how that whole process of light source works. And again, I can't stress enough here, folks. What I'm looking at here today, and these first two reviews are more the aesthetics, or pardon me, mechanics of how the whole process of direction and angle function. As we move on in the lesson plans, we'll utilize more and more of an intuitive aesthetic sense of putting down the surfaces. And you'll find that out in the next couple of weeks. This is more, these first two lessons here about lesson and light source is more about how and what the formula is. So we don't get caught up trying to guess at it, that there's a method to our madness here that works like that. So let's go back to another sketch here. Come back to a center line, put a little drive line over the top of that. I'm going to roll that over, bring that into play. This is a round shape. Pardon me as I just rotate out of this thing. I'm going to turn this upside down, put a bit of thrust in the sketch itself. There's a basic form. Basic form. Turn it around again. Pardon me. Here's my basic shape right there. So there's my center line, and then here's my form right there. Same process again. Now that I've got this shape down, let's do this. Angle of light. And again, pick a point of reference. One on that surface, and back here. Interesting thing about this, same process again. You can go either way. You can kind of guess it where you are, but I like to come back down and go vertically, lightly, vertically, and vertically. Then pick up that same point of reference, come back to direction and direction. Parallel, parallel, parallel. Now let's pick an angle of light. We'll go back in through here. Pardon me as I rotate here. Angle of light, angle of light, angle of light. Again, all three of those areas parallel. Parallel here and parallel there. Parallel in direction, parallel in angle. Now intersection. 1, 2, 3. Now you know you're going to be in good shape. Look how that whole section comes out and does the following. Look how that shadow expands. It goes around the corner. There it is right there. Expands meaning not. Look at this. It's low slope to a high slope. Low shadow to high shadow. That tells you that you're on the money as far as developing that form is concerned. Let's come back in through here. Let's put the shadow in. Some more impact in this guy. Pardon my hands here, guy. And there it is. There's my shadow. I'm going to stop again here and get a good representation from Starship, from Captain Nemo, and from Doug. Making sense so far, gang? There's a lot of geometry going on here. And again, I don't want to get caught up in making it confusing for us. It gets down, it comes right down to a very simple formula, angle and direction, and how we get that established, and how to use that ground plane in conjunction with the shapes we're dealing with. So let me know if I'm doing okay here, gang. All right, come back in here. Oh yeah, great. Yeah, this is basically only the projection. And this is basically only the projection of the edge. Yeah, that's Nemo. That's absolutely correct. It is a projection of the edge. If I'm yeah, this, and this. The reason for that, you're absolutely correct there, Nemo. Yeah, let me repeat the question. This is basically only the projection of the edge, right? Yeah, that's correct. The edge meaning the edge of where that tangent is on the circle, the edge of where that is on the form itself, and the edge of where that is. And now that could be a radius. That could be that could be a softer radius. But it's still, if you project that out, for example, here's the radius. If you project that out, you're still going to get this in perspective. You're going to come across that shape, and you're going to come across there. That's still the edge or the intersection you're working with. And then you soften it off. I hope that makes sense. Does that help? Yep, you got it. You got it. That's exactly correct. So hope that makes sense, Nemo. Great question. Looking good? Yep, of the light fringe. That's it. The light fringe meaning there it is, there's the edge, and there's the edge. All these cases are doing the same thing. Well said. Got it. That's cool. Now, I hope that made sense. Let's do this. Here, if I were to project this out, let's draw a section in this thing. If I projected a section across this form, it's very round and did this. And it also has a radius on it. So if that softens off, Nemo, pardon me here, if there's a section to it, and if that softens off right there, I'm still dealing with that little section right in there. That's where my intersection is, which is now translated is down here. Let me do this. There's the fringe, there's the radius, but that's still the point of reference you want right there, where that intersection takes place, right there. Very cool. So far, so good? All right, gang. Hey, thanks for your patience. This is, again, it can become very laborious. It can become extremely intimidating, but I don't want it to become that for you and for me. I'm going to utilize a very simple principle: angle of light and direction of light and ground plane to get that thing to really settle itself. And again, let me stress this too. In every instance, you're going to see me do two things: keep a high light source. And number two, drive the viewer or the shadow back in the picture plane, meaning I'm going to take it rearward, take it rearward, take it rearward. Let's go back to another object here. Let's go something a little more truncated. Let's do this. Let's get the verticals up. Kind of come back and create an envelope here. This, back in perspective. Draw through it. Pick that beauty up. And let's get this guy. Just a nice little simple block. A little bit of an angle to it. And there it is. There's my basic shape right there. Same thing again. Now I'm going to come back in here and pick a direction of light. Now here, I pick up this corner, and I'm going to start very quickly by doing the following. Now I can come down here and just ignore, because there's my vertical right there. That comes down and through. That's it. There's my one intersection here. Now let's go back the other way. I can a little more accelerate. I can have that same approach here. Direction, or angle rather. Angle. Come down the ground line, and then again, back to this corner, and you just utilize that. Come out, intersection, intersection. Drop that in, and take it behind the form. Again, behind the form meaning this. There's my perspective line up on top. So that line below is going to follow that line in perspective right back there. It's going to give me a little bit of a corner to deal with right there. Make sense, gang? So let's do this. Let's put the shadow in. There's my shadow. What happens if I add something to it? For example, let's do this. If I extend this out, a little bit of a block in it. Come in through here. And I just create that, and I put a little bit of an angle to it. A little bit of an angled surface. There it is. I just changed it or revised the personality of that shape. There it is. If I add that little snoot to it, what happens now? Same process. Draw through it. Draw through it. Where that intersection is right there is critical. That intersection right there on the back side, we don't see that. We're drawing right through it to see where we are here. Now, I'm going to take that same approach by doing the following. Follow the same angle of light, drop it right on in. There's my line of angle. There's my line of angle right there. And guess what? That's what that shape's going to look like in shadow. It's going to look like this. And by drawing through that, for example, draw through that base, get that corner, and the angle back in through here. That's where that shadow starts. Isn't that cool? Look how that worked. I'm gonna go back and through that again. That makes sense, gang? There's my shadow. There it is. Once again, I got that angle by doing the following. Draw through it, intersection, draw through it. There's the point I want right there. In addition to that one, there's my angle coming down. It starts there and goes underneath that. That's how I got that angle. That's how we got that shadow to work. That makes sense there, gang? Very cool. Let's go back a little further. Let's add a little of this. Let's add a bevel to this. Bevel, to bevel, to bevel, to bevel. Let's take it inside. Let's recess that. Really neat. Now I can take that same approach by toning this away. Toning the inside again with that same angle. There's my angle of light. I'm going to come right back in through here. A bit of shadow on this guy. And then a little bit of a break here. And follow that same angle right on through. And by toning that face right there by doing that, there's a little cap on the end of that thing, properly illustrated. Hey, Horton, how are you? Nice to see you on board here. We're just going through a little review session here on Light Source again. Going through a very simple process of taking simple shapes and following the same thing we did last week. I'm just kind of reviewing a little bit here and go a little further with it. Again, playing or working up and into that very simple premise of the real rule here is working with the angle of light, which is here, and the direction of light, which is here on the ground plane. So that's really critical. In each one of these cases, that's how we're working with this form. Learning how to plot through this thing, and I'll say this hopefully for everybody's benefit. Once again, I'm probably being redundant, but I'm not trying to be redundant, but I want to be very careful how this happens. I do not want this to become an exercise of futility for anybody here. What I'd like to have us understand is, yeah, there is a formula. It's called direction and angle. But once you understand that, it really begins to dictate everything we do. And the three principles we worked with last Monday, and again, we were working with here again today, are three very critical ones. Number one, always work with a highlight source, which means you minimize the shadow. Number two, always drive. Hey, Starship, how are you? Thank you. Always drive the direction of light or the viewer back into the picture plane. And then thirdly, always work in terms of being extremely simple. Let the shape let the shape flatter the actual form itself. So here again, notice almost every one of these. Now, notice what happens with that problem is if you work with a high light source or a low light source, that shadow could be way out here. And what we don't want to do is get to the place where that shadow overpowers what you're trying to really accentuate. It's so critical. You can get to the place where, for example, if you have a real low light source, it can be, especially in product or automobile design or architecture, it can become really stifling because it blocks the view or it prohibits the elegance of what you're trying to illustrate. Let me stop right there. And again, let me just ask again, before we move on to the second phase here, second set of sketches. Is this helping? Let's hope. Well, I hope the silence means it's doing pretty good. How do you get the gradient of the overhang shadow? How do you get the gradient? Well, the gradient, all right, a good question, Nemo, is this. I get that gradient by doing the following. Since it's under, if I were to draw a side view of this, let's do this. This would be a good way to describe this thing. If I were to draw a side view of this form, it's really this to that. It has this hood on it by doing the following. We've added that little cap on it. That gradient right there. This is the area that's going to be most concerned with. That gradient right there, that little additional cap. As we put a light source on this, as it comes down and begins to carry on, what happens is this. Underneath this area, you're going to get a real strong shadow right into here. As it begins to approach the light source, you're going to get reflected light that's going to lighten that whole surface up. Helping, not hindering. That's good. Just by estimate. Well, yeah, you can. It's a matter of character. Yes, it's true. I'm almost one. I get the strength of the shadow up here. Let's do this. Let's get the strength of the shadow down first. That's going to be real strong here. As I begin to approach pretty close to the edge, I'll let that fade just a bit by doing this. Again, darkest darks way underneath that lip. That's underneath there. It's going to get the darkest amount of shadow. As I approach the base of that form, it's going to get some reflected light. So that's going to help me determine where that shadow is. Yes, you're right. That's strictly an aesthetic character, which you can control, Nemo. That's it. You take the reflective, yeah, that's exactly right. Reflective light, believe me, this is basic light source stuff. In about maybe another month or so, we're going to get into reflected light, the three forms of light: static light, ambient light, reflected light. And boy, watch out, because then what's fun about that triad is, once you understand how this works, you're going to love this comment, so don't misunderstand it, because I don't mean it to be derogatory at all. If you understand this, when you get into the three aspects of really genuine light source, I'll use a Sid Mead line. You can cheat like mad because you know what you're doing with it. That's what's cool about it. You can actually just go like gangbusters because you know what those three triads are working for you. That's it. So that's essential info, because that makes it look so much better than just a black bar. Yeah, it does. If you knock that in there, for example, as black, it might look like a design line or a feature or color change. Nemo, you're right. And it's also the same thing we do this. Let me just sharpen the stick. We do this as well. If I come across here and begin to tone this away from the light source, I'm going to come up on top and soften it. Let that look come right through there, that little bit of highlight. See that little highlight right there? That's going to tell me that's a radius in there. Real soft. Real soft, real soft. That little highlight in there. Now, as I come down the pike here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come back in and tone it. As I come back, I'm going to change right into the angle of light and really kind of sophisticate that shape up. Look how that gives it more and more believability. Agreed or not? Any one of these guys, you take that same approach. Now, when you get to this phase, when you get into the rendering phase of it, or the actual illustration phase of it, that becomes a very, I'm not going to tread on that snake at all, because I think that becomes a very much of an individual personality approach, how you begin to see certain things. And who am I to judge that? I think it's great that I respect the fact that you guys see things very differently and have a unique perspective on certain elements. That's marvelous. There's no formula for being creative. It's what you feel to be correct with. Really interesting. I've said this a couple of weeks ago, and I think I'll say it again here today. It's that what we resist will continue to persist. If we resist looking at this thing from an example of being very fundamentally sound, like angle and direction, and tightening up the light source, highlight source, tucking the shadow underneath the shape, etc. If that keeps persisting us as a doubt, then it'll always become a resistance for us. We need to resist that by being much more persistent and being very careful with how we treat these surfaces, because it's extremely sensitive. I do a lot of commission work, and boy, believe me, I'm really sensitive about the fact that when that individual asks for a certain look, I'll come right back and say, well, if you did that, it might destroy the vehicle, or it might destroy the product, or the architecture, or the house, or the building, whatever. And when you explain this to them, they say, oh, I see. Yeah, I got you. That's a good point of reference. So that's a good conversation here, gang. Thank you very, 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 very much. Let's go on to phase 2 here. Get rid of this guy. Let's carry on. Let's come back in and just put another product together here. Let's kind of lightly draw through this guy. Pardon me as I kind of sketch this in. Just going to get this. Just going to get this through. This to this, coming down, running over a diving pattern here. Let's get this guy a little bit of a bevel up front. A little bevel up front. Just going to block this in very quickly to show you what happens when form changes. When they're not square to the world, so to speak, and there's a little bit of an angle to it. Pardon me, I rotate this sketch just a bit here. Now, we've got an element here that has a bit of a beveled front. In other words, in elevation, it looks like this. Flat at the back, flat on top, flat below, but there's a bevel right there. There's an angle up front. That's going to change dramatically with light source when you put that on there by doing the following. Let's come back in through here and get in just a bit more. There's the basic shape. Now again, I'm going to come back in through here and do the same thing. Now that I've got the shape down, I'm going to come back in here and pick a direction of light by doing this. There. Now notice, I've come a little bit forward here because of the angle of the form itself. I'm still keeping it tighter at the shape. So if I go backwards, there's no shadow at all. If I come from behind, all the shadow is going to come forward. I don't want to do that either. So I just want to make sure that that thing really looks like it's just barely beyond normal. All right, let's pick a point of reference here. At the peak and run right there, and one right there. Now let's do this. Let's come down vertically, come down vertically, come down vertically, and then begin to use that same process. Here's my direction of light, parallel, 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 and parallel. I'm just laying them out there to kind of give myself a plot line. Oh, pardon me, I'm sorry. A plot line to work with. There it is. I come down vertically, even though the surface is angled, I want to come down vertically and find where I am here, right across the line. So we're good. Come down vertically, right across. Come out vertically and out, vertically and out. All set? Now let's do this. Let's get a direction or an angle of light. I'm going to come back in there and do the following. Here's my angle of light. Parallel. Angle of light. Parallel. Angle of light. Parallel. Angle of light. Parallel. And angle of light. Parallel. Now there we are. Here's my plot line. Intersection. 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 Look how that shadow widened out as we move away from that peak. That's because of the form, and the plan view has that real strong peak lines. And the plan view, that shape is doing this. Here's the form. Here's my center line. It has a little bit of a diamond shape in the back and very much of a diamond shape in the front. So there it is, roughly speaking, in the plan view. What happens is when that light hits it, notice from over here, much narrower, much wider because of the change in the angle itself. So let's zoom back and ink this in. And let's just do this. Come back in and do the same thing again. Let's plot it out. It's line to line to there, and then from there to there to there. And a little bit behind that, just enough. Let's put the shadow in place here. There's my form. There's my edge. There's my shadow on the base form right there. Very simple. But again, I'm going to be very, very clear here today. We're not getting into a lot of complicated shapes. I just want to really stress the fact that there's a formula here to work with, no matter what the shape is doing, whether it's a series of compounds, like we started with there, or another series of shapes that are very simplified here. There's still, some individuals will call this extremely simple. I call it extremely excruciating because there's a lot of thinking going on and a lot of visualizing, seeing how things operate. Not easy to do. Believe me, it's not easy to do. So I really appreciate your patience. I hope I'm communicating all right. So let's go back and do this. Let's add an element on top of this form. Let's say if I add something on top of the shape that does this. And just put a little form on top of this guy. Does that alter the formula? Not at all. You've got to keep it consistent. So here's my drive line, drive line, drive line. I've added just a small little block on top of this shape. I'm going to use the same principle. I'm going to come back in through here. Here's my direction of light. Here's my direction of light, parallel. Again, direction of light, parallel. Same thing through here. Is my angle of light. It's that to that. And if I draw through this guy, it's that to that. Now it's going to be this. There's my connection, and my connection. So it's this over to this. And on top of that, here's my shadow that's going to create. There it is, that same form. I'm going to work the upper and the lower as you go with it. For example, if I had a circle over here, for example, like it's hollow, it does this. How am I going to defeat that guy? Well, I pick a point of reference where I want to really kind of pick this thing apart and say I want that exit right there. I come right back again, that same line, parallel, run that through. There's my light source. That shadow is going to look like this. And it's going to bend toward the angle of light. And that's going to tell me what that shape is doing. Notice, darker. And back to Nemo's point about fading as it goes into the light source. And there's my angle. I can kind of a little bit further. Look how believable that is. Yes or no? That make sense, gang? It works no matter what the geometry is, no matter what the surfaces you're dealing with. That simple premise of angle and direction is absolutely foolproof. It's physical. It's an absolute matter of physics. Really interesting. So if that works good, there's another example there of how that whole thing begins to function here. So let's go back and do this. Let's go another shape here. Let's go back in and develop this. Let's go a little bit more round again. Let's go back to round, draw through it, sketch the form. sketch the form. Notice again, this is the one I think the round surfaces, let me stop there for a moment. The rounder those shapes get, the more difficult they become, because you have to really think in terms of where the tangents are. Now let me explain that for a moment. We did the same thing over here. When you go to a circular form, like this little flashlight study, we had to find the center, plot through it, go through the actual shape itself, and find where those tangents are, which rested right on the tangent point of the circle. So when you get around forms, that's what you've got to watch for here. And I think the more complicated it gets, and we'll show you that in some time to come here in future lessons about how this begins to function. So let's go back to this one. Same process again. Let's kind of box this in. Let's find out where my center is. Let's do this, this, and let's block it in. Now, what I'm drawing here is something we need to see. But I hope I can say this in the proper spirit. When I draw things, I said this when we first started doing perspective lessons, I don't draw the object, I don't draw the car, I don't draw the product, I don't draw the boat, the landscape. I draw the geometry. What's it made out of? Is it cylindrical? Is it conical? Is it rectangular? Is it cubistic? What is it? I build the geometry, then I carve it out of that. So let's do this. Let's come back in and get that. Let's get that circle in place. Let's find its center. That's going to help us here. All this is going on in my mind, as twisted as it is, when I start drawing things. I'm going to draw that horizontal right through it. That right there is going to tell me, there's my perspective tangent right there. That point is critical on that surface. But what does that help me do? Let me turn this upside down for a moment. Let's draw that line through. And now let's draw that line through. That's my tangent right there. That's the surface. That's the widest point of that form. That's going to be enormously helpful when I do the following. I'm going to pick a point of reference. Let's see. I'm going to pick a point of reference. Let's say there, one there, one there, one there, and maybe the end cap. All set? Okay, next comes up the direction of light. Here comes the direction of light. Now for that shape, there's my direction. Down to ground, direction. Down to ground, direction. Down to ground, direction. Down to ground, direction. Now, angle of light. Angle, 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 angle. Parallel, parallel, all the way through that form. Let me stop right there. Am I going too quickly here, or are we all right? You good? Well, I bet take the silence as a yes. So far, so good. And believe me, once again, not to be redundant, but sincere, really thank you for hanging on here. This is not an easy lesson to go through. And I'm going to do the best I can to keep it simple and direct and efficient for us. How about everybody else? Horton, you doing okay? And also Doug? Fantastic. Now we'll move along here very quickly. I don't want to bore you to death here. Now we have those points of reference. There's 1. There's 2, there's 3, there's, pardon me, 4, and then there's 5 right there. So let's drop those points in and come right through the shape. There it is there. Notice again, that's really tight up against that form. This is what I want. I want that shape to kind of really flatter what we're after here. Yeah, very good, Horton. Thank you. Let's come back in and put the tone in. There's a shadow. Let me turn that around. More impact in it. There's my shadow right there. How cool is that? Notice how really light that begins to look. Here's why. When you start to illustrate something like this, let's say you put some light on. There's light over here. Surfaces, light, 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 and then all of a sudden it rolls away from the light source. So about right there, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make that thing. Take the side of the pencil and just put a nice simple little form right through it right there. There it is. I just rendered that form like that. It goes back to what Neiman was saying earlier. This whole idea of why is that white? Because it rolls underneath. That's going to pick up ground and reflect the light on the surface. That's all coming ahead of this. It's the series ahead, for example, in these exercises. It's going to be really, really cool. Let's do this. Let's add something to it. Let's come back in and add something off the back of this thing. Let's put a little bit of an angle to it. Let's draw that in. Let's draw that in. Let's bring that back in perspective. Let's put that angle in place. Put that back and just put something, just a simple shape up on top of this guy. Just roll that off just a touch. Just soften it off. There it is. That shape comes off of that form right there. So now the next step is, all right, how do I plot that guy? Same thing. You come back again down to here. Here's my direction. Here's my direction on that upper. And then here, again, direction on that upper. Again, off that corner, here's the angle of light. There's the angle of light. Very little shadow right there. Just a real tight, small little shadow right behind that form that does that. So let's do this. Intersection, intersection, shadow. And there it is. That's what that shadow is going to look like on top of that form itself. Very simple, very direct, but powerful. Now you can do this too. There's sometimes it's kind of fun to do the following here. I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but you can actually take this and extend it just a little bit more and roll it, just round it just a bit. To tell the viewer, notice there's enough radius in that to tell the viewer that that surface up on top is round. That goes back again to Captain Nemo's excellent observation about how to really fade this stuff, how to make it more believable, how to flatter a shape. The geometry itself, the direction, and the angle will set the tone for the shadow. What we do to flatter that is now we understand what the geometry is doing. I can take little tricks like this and go back and fade that a little bit and use a real aesthetic license to flatter it. Much like we did here. Nemo's comment about this form here. How do I fade that? Well, notice again this little elevation here. The deepest shadow is going to be underneath that overhang. There's the overhang. There's the deepest form of the shadow right in here. As I come down closer to ground, I'm going to let it fade, and it's going to pick up reflected light. That's all yet to come. I mean, it's such a powerful medium, and I hope I can say this, and I don't want to misunderstand me at all. I've been very fortunate all of my days to be around absolutely tremendous talent that knew this stuff like the back of their hand. And I want us to understand it just like the back of your hand. In fact, I want us to understand it so it happens just like that it's instant, that you don't wrestle with it, you don't become frustrated by it, because it can become an extremely difficult circumstances here. But again, I had tremendous mentors that really knew the craft, knew it well, knew it so well, they made it look so easy. And that's my mission here today. Every time I go on the stream, whether it's Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, my mission is to make it look so easy, you can do it better than I can. And believe me, you will. I believe that with all my heart. My task is to break down things in a simple set of matrices so that you can put it all together based on how you see your world unfolding and create your own identity. Phenomenal. That's what it comes down to. And if I get that done, believe me, you can write a check big enough. Well, on second thought, you could, but that's all right. So we'll go from there. There we go, gang. Let's go into a couple of exercises here and wrap this thing up and make sure we feel some questions for you. Let's go back and do a round surface again. Let's go back to a rounder surface. Let's go back up on top. Let's get that upper piece in place. Let's come down here, run a couple of verticals. Take a basic cylindrical form. Let's get the base down. Very critical. It's going to open that up. Notice once again, let me just kind of beat that just a bit more. Very, very simple thing in perspective, how it all begins to function. Notice how the upper circle is much tighter. As you move down, it gets a lot wider. You can prove that to yourself. Just take a can or a cylinder or a cup of some sort, hold it close to your head, your eye level, and then begin to lower it. And you begin to see that whole circle open up dramatically. Pardon me. We have a problem sometimes drawing round forms because we want to make that circle the same as that circle. That can't happen physically. Good perspective takes care of that instantly. So, okay, now we've got that. Let's come back and let's build it. Where are we here? Let's build it. Let's find out where the center is. In perspective, I'm going to do a one-point cylinder. It comes out to here. 1 point, meaning those drive lines go back to a horizon line. I'm going to find my center. It's going to help me guide where the light source is. There's my center right there. So I'm going to come back and through here and undo this. Here's my direction of light. Here's my direction of light. And there's my direction of light. That center line right there, that point from there, there, and there, help me determine where the light source is coming from on the ground. So there it is there. Now I'm going to come back up through here and take that same process up on top. Find out where my center is. Construct it. There's my center. Let's see how close we are. Let's match these guys up. So I come up vertically. How about that? Right on the money. Beautiful. There I am there. Again, that point, and that point are going to become very critical. I'm going to use that point right there to develop and start my angle of light by doing the following. I'm going to rotate this thing, come out here, pick up the angle of light. And again, down through here. On the other side, there it is there. Draw through it like a glass, draw through that perspective. And then pick up this point right here. And again, off the center line, which is right there, draw a line right through there on that center line and come right down to here. So I'll use, pardon me, that point, and that point to do this. Get that circle in place right there. So I'm going to see that much. See how I did that? Boy, you talk about a lot of thought process going on. You're learning how to see through things transparently. When you do that, you're building a vocabulary of understanding shape and geometry. To me, that's extremely powerful. Boy, pardon me again, I'm losing my voice. What's powerful about the drawing phenomenon is the understanding of how geometry works. It all begins to work together, and everything we can see and conceive of will be built around the 5 basic solids. And we're going to get into the 5 basic solids in some time here in about maybe 5 or 6 weeks if things stay active here. So let's do this. Let's get our shadow in place. Let's put that in, tone it a little bit more. And there it is. There's my shadow. Now, interesting enough, what happens if I change the shape? What happens if I come back and draw through it and then begin to cut this thing off and just do this? What if I truncate this? Slide it, and then draw through it again in perspective. And I change that shape. In other words, I started with this. Pure cylinder. There's exhibit A. That's where I started. Now B, I came back in and did the following. I cut into it. How am I going to plot that guy? No problem whatsoever. Same process again. I'm going to come back in here and pick a point of reference across here. Draw that right through. Pick that point of reference right there. Angle of light. Bring that on in. Notice, look how severe that angle is. I don't want to do that. Let's go back. This is a good example of being able to cheat that light source and go a lot more. Now I'm going to take the light source and really angle it and get minimized, really minimize that shadow in there. I can do one or two things. Let's likely do this. Initially with the right light source that does this. It comes in here, and then now that form will do this. That's how that shape is going to look like. If I just tone that in lightly, it's going to do that. That's what happens with a highlight source on an undercut like that. Now that works, but however, look at this. I want the viewer to know that that's a round, this surface out here is round. So I'm going to take off on that edge right there and draw an element in there like this. I'm going to move that right around and do this. Here's a shadow I really want to show. Which is more believable, this or that? You know, this portion here tells me it's round. That does not, even though it's pretty true to form. It just drops right on in there, and it gets pretty powerful. Yeah, that's going to happen with a high light source. That overhang is deep enough that it's going to take that thing all the way down. But I really like the fact that I can now cheat that light source by not using part of the mechanics, but yet I want to make sure that the viewer knows that that lip right there is round. So I'm going to drop that light source in through here. I can change that character by doing the following. I can go back and drop it into here. It's a matter of choice. Let's do this just to kind of make sure I want to make sure that the viewer knows that surface is round. That's round to that round. That's flat. And it does okay, but it doesn't tell me the story. Let me stop right there, okay? Does that help? Come back into here and just tone that in a little bit more. That shape tells me that form is extremely round. The light source is from behind. It's coming in, and driving me forward, but at the same time, that overhang is that area right there is that area right there in shadow. Yeah, it definitely helps, doesn't it? I mean, it takes away, a great point, Nemo. It takes away that real slab look to it, but it gives it more roundness to it. Again, that's a good example of why when you do that, let me do a little thumbnail here. When you do that, it comes up by doing the following. There it is. There's the shape. Oh, pardon me. There's the shape. There's the cone, or the drum rather here. We've done this. We've dropped that back just a bit. We've dropped that back just a bit. Much better to have that healthy look by doing this. Here's now my shadow. There's more roundness to it. That is so much healthier because it looks like you've got a round surface there, no doubt. Much, much stronger. So, and again, if we put that together, it makes more sense when you do this. Away from the light source, tone that cylinder. And look how that tells a story right there. That little thumbnail tells a huge story about what that form is doing. Super, great point there, Nemo. Thank you. Let's go back here and let's just finish up with one more here. Let's just kind of put together a nice little simple form here, just a wedge of some shape. Let's run that through. Run that through. Same process again. There's just to wrap things up just a bit here. A little bit of radius up front, a little radius, gets through it. There I am. I'm going to come back in now and pick a direction of light, drive it back, pick a point of reference here, come down, and run it parallel, parallel, and parallel. Now let's go to the angle of light, which is going to be here, here, and here. And again, nothing up front there. I don't need that. I'm going to come back in and pick up those points of reference. That one, that one, that one. Again, notice, here's my drive line right here. I'm going to take that shape just behind the surface here. When I extend this shadow in place, and I connect those dots and get that shadow to work, I'm going to take that right back parallel to that by going right behind the form. See how that line parallels that line in perspective? Critical. All right, let's put the shadow in place. A little more tone to it. And there you are, gang. There's a pretty good example of how that light source begins to operate in some very simple forms here. It's a very complicated shape. So let's go back to where we started. Here's the first plate we generated. Same principle again, working with, actually, I'm going to go back one here. That's not fair. This is where we started last week with that simple geometry. There's the angle and direction, how it begins to function on the ground plane. Parallel to parallel. That's what we started with. Again, notice highlight source, tuck the shadow in. Really, really, really important. It's just different forms. How to find the tangent on the surface to get those light source or that shadow to plot. Same thing here. Finding the tangents and then coming down and connecting the dots to get the shadow to work. The more complicated the form. Great question here by Nemo, getting into the intersection of the fringes. That section right there, it's got a radius on it, but we still use the corner of it to get that plot to work. It's not going to falsify the shadow. It's definitely going to make it stronger. So that's pretty cool right there. So there you are. Got it there. There it is there. Come back in through here. Then the second phase is a little more complicated, adding things on, making sure that whether you add it on or go to the subordinate, it still functions the same way. That same direction and angle has to be honored. You can change the light source as you go here, but sometimes this is a good example of changing the light source to make sure that that looks like a round surface as opposed to a real long, deep shadow. That doesn't tell you an awful lot there at all. So that's how we ended it there. And I think maybe just to wrap it up here, I've got a couple minutes. Let's go back into something that does this. Let's start here, just a simple little exercise. Simple little ballpoint pen sketch. Real nice and loose, a little easy there. All set, gang? Here's what really begins to help you. Using the same principle, very compound, very difficult form to work with here. But I'm just going to concentrate on one thing, and that is developing the shadow on this guy. It'll look like this. Here's my direction of light. Here's my angle of light. I'm going to come back in there and watch what happens here. There's my intersection point. There's my intersection point right about there. I'm going to drive the shadow in. Notice that little kick right there? There's a little kick on the rocker panel right here. Comes back out again, does the following. The bone line through this thing, let's kind of carry it all together here. So there we go. Comes in, follows it, and I'm going to really cheat the daylights out of it. Come down here. I'm going to come in so far, then I'm going to kick up that same angle. Come off the wheel, pick up this point up again, and just drive this thing in. That tells me everything I need to know about that ground shadow. Is helping, gang? Am I going too fast here? Notice again, same principle we started with right here. Nothing has changed one iota. There it is. It's the same principle. Angle and direction. Angle. Let's kind of ink that on a bit further here. Here's my angle. Here's my angle. Same principle. I'm using that same thing on the ground line to develop that shadow. I'm going to come back into it here. And there you are. Did that help or not, gang? Making sense? Well, it's quiet out there. I'm not. Hope everything's okay. I'll just hold on a moment here to get a response from everything. I'm going to make sure we clarify this before we head out here today. Making sense, gang, or not? Well, I think the key thing here in quotation here, in closing it all up, is again, whether you're going with a simple form like this, a cube, or a very compound form like an automobile, I'm still using those same principles to develop that shadow on the ground plane. Just really interesting how it all begins to work here. Oh, thanks very much, Horton. Making sense? How about you, Nemo? You still there? Is this making sense for you? Very good, gang. And again, let's just kind of put a little bit of finishing touch in this, a little bit of softness in it. Bring me through. We'll get into this a little bit later, some of the lesson forms. There's a simple little sketch showing what light source can do here, gang. So I hope that a bit of a complicated form to work with here in terms of closing things out here today, but I just thought we'd give it a real quick shot here to see, hopefully that whether the simple or complex begins to work together here. Again, just really a lot of fun to put it all together. Simply stated, nothing changed from this complicated form here as opposed to where we started with the cube itself. Again, all built on one simple formula. The angle of light, direction of light, keep the shadows extremely tight. And again, tuck it underneath the form here. Notice how that form, now if I were to put another light source in and drive the shadow out here, my goodness, it would be a huge shadow, destroy the form itself. All that to say, thank you so much today, gang. If you have any interest in furthering the education as far as drawing skills and the like, please feel free to visit my website at drcontrast.com. I've got a nice beginner series here, take you from perspective all the way through to final case studies and design and so forth. Hope this has been of some help to you today. And please, I'm making an appeal here. Hey, Lenny, how are you? Hope you've been well. Yes, I have been. Thank you very much. I just hope that if you like what you see here today, please, I'm making this appeal because I really want to make an impact on people who want to learn how to draw well. I'm still learning, and I'm sure we all are. We'll all learn something. So I would appreciate it if you pass along the word that we're available here, and that my stream is on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays to kind of gather an audience. I really want to develop a real strong following, so I really need your help to do that, please, making that appeal for your assistance. And secondly, if I've done something right here, let me know. If there's something that I did not say right or did not make sense, tell me. Really make a big difference. I'm actually making changes here. See, Horton, thank you so much. You make it so much easier to understand. Well, thank you very much. That's nice to hear, Horton. Thank you. So last but not least, please pass the word on to your audiences that I'm available here. I just want to really build this thing and make sure we have a good impact on it. I've been very fortunate thus far, and I really appreciate and respect everybody coming along here to do some really cool stuff. And it's been a lot of fun. And as we go through each lesson on Monday, the number one objective is to not get caught up with some of the complications. And my objective is very simple, to do this, to make it look so easy that you can do it better, and you will. And I'm able to do it. I mean, I'm just still learning like you are. So once again, thank you so much. Visit drcontrast.com. And if you have any lesson interest, or if you know someone who might be interested in doing the same thing, let me know. Pass it on to my website. I'd love to have them join us and learn some things about drawing. And with that thought in mind, I'll be looking at adding a web store, some of my illustration work for Ferrari, Corvette, Maserati, Rolls-Royce, a whole bunch of stuff. A sketchbook on basics is coming on board as well, so we'll be adding to that as we go. And last but not least, I've always signed off with this because I think it's absolutely critical. Always remember to never forget to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great day and all the very best. Thank you. Bye-bye.